Hey everyone. Right now we're going to study and learn about Active Directories because in the first episode I'm not really familiar with terminologies and other stuffs that are related with Active Directory. So in this episode we're just going to look at some articles, look at some um, let's say study materials that are related to Active Directory in general, just so I can get a good grasp as to what it actually is because I basically have no idea. So we're going to start with an actual, so Active Directory. Active Directory is a directory service developed by Microsoft that provides a centralized way to manage permissions and access to network resources within Windows domain networks. Windows domain networks, what is that? This domain network is a centralized network structure that allows for the management of user accounts, computers, and resources through a central database known as Active Directory. So Active Directory is a database that contains a way to manage permissions, basically. So basically, all of this revolves around that Active Directory basically manages user permissions. That's why it can be, exploited during attacks, mainly because this is where you elevate your privileges in order to actually do privileged things inside, let's say, a company's network or the company or the network that you're trying to attack. So for example, Active Directory is a hierarchical directory service that stores information about users, computers, groups, and other resources on a network. It allows administrators to manage permissions and access to these resources efficiently. Active Directory is primarily used in Windows environment and is included in Windows Server operating systems as a set of processes and services. Okay, let's take a look at this one then. Active Directory domain services. This is actually used quite a lot during the article, the DFIR report. Active Directory domain services. One of the components that are used during the attack scans for domains in the Active Directory. So this might be an important part. Let's see. Active Directory was first released in Windows Server 2000. Its primary function is to provide authentication and authorization to users on the network. So yeah, authorization to users on the network. So basically, it's the one that's providing the authentication and authorization in the network. For example, authentication is a process where Active Directory verifies a user's credentials, username and password. The user's credentials are stored in the Active Directory database. Oh, okay. So basically, if you've gained access to this Active Directory database, you can see everyone's username and password then each and every account because it's the only thing that it holds. Well, maybe it's not the only thing, but it's the main thing that holds and verifies every username and password. Authorization is the process that grants or denies a user to do something such as edit a file or access an application based on its authority. right? Basically, it checks if you're authorized to do such thing, right? For example, if you're like an employee, you can't gain access to like an admin file, right? Because only administrators can get access to that. That's basically their authority. They have authorization to do that. Since it's released, Microsoft has added additional services to Active Directory. More on this in lesson 6. Let's just like, take a look at this example. Sample 1, authenticate users. Jim logs in with this. Jim was recently hired as an accountant for Active Directory Pro. The IT administrator creates an account for Jim in Active Directory. The account is unique to Jim and contains details such as first name, last name, office, phone number, etc. Jim is provided with a username and password so he can log into the company's network. Jim logs into his laptop with the provided username and password. This to log on request goes to the Active Directory server to verify Jim's username and password. The Active Directory looks up Jim's account and verifies the username and password. The account has been verified. Jim is now logged into his laptop and is authenticated to the domain. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. Active Directory domain services. So basically, example, the Active Directory server will authorize access to network resources. Jim's logged into his computer using his username and password and wants to access his email, contract file, and accounting database server. These network resources check with Active Directory to see if Jim's account is authorized for access. Active Directory verifies Jim's account is authorized for access. Yep. Jim's account is granted access. Jim can now check email, modify the contract file, and work on the database server. So basically, it checks if he's authorized to do this, to do that. And if he's not, he's denied permissions. Authorize and deny user access. In this last example, we'll look at another where user just makes access, allowing denied permissions. Pam logs into the network with a username and password. She tries to access the same resources as Jim. This network resources check with Active Directory to see if Pam's account is authorized for access. Active Directory verifies Pam's account authentication. Active Directory also checks what resources Pam's account has. Pam can now access email and contract file, but does not have permission to access the accounting database server. Okay, so I think one of the most common examples of this are like from Google Drives, right? If you wanna share your the contents of your of a for example, let's say a folder, a directory in your Google Drive account, you can set the permissions that are granted, right? For example, if you shared the folder through a link, you can decide whether they can just view it or they also have the ability to edit it. So you're giving them either read permissions or read and write permissions, basically. Active Directory Domain Services. Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS. Active Directory Domain Services is like the main component of Active Directory. Yep, this one is like the one that are used a lot during the DFIR report. ADDS can be broken down into three main functions. Directory service. A directory service provides methods for storing data in a structured way. That makes administration and access easy. For example, Active Directory stores information on users, computers, and groups. Authentication service authenticates network users. Authorization service grants or denies network users access to network resources. It is important to stop right here and review these three terms. Don't get confused with the following three terms. They are referred to Active Directory. AD, Active Directory, is a server that is running the Active Directory domain services role. Wait. A directory service provides methods for storing data in a structured way. It makes administration and access easy. For example, Active Directory stores information on users, computers, and groups. Basically, this is the part of this domain service. It's like basically the database, right? Because it stores data. Directory service basically the same as the database. And ADDS, this is a server that is running the Active Directory domain service as well. Okay. Domain controller DC. This is also a server running the Active Directory domain service role. A domain controller is the same thing as a server running ADDS. It's basically the same thing, just another one. Is that it? Let's see. When you install Active Directory, you will be installing the ADDS role on a Windows server. Server roles, add roles and features wizard. Server roles, Active Directory certificate services. Active Directory certificate services is used to create certification authorities and related role service that allow you to issue and manage certificates used in a variety of applications. Oh, wait, I kind of understand it. So basically, what you do is you actually just install Active Directory on a server, right? Because basically, most of let's say networks use servers, right? So basically, the main thing that operates inside the servers are the Active Directory because it manages everything that is related to users access, authorization, authentication, right? So you give it the Active Directory certificate services to authorize and authenticate users. Next, I'll go over some of the main components of ADDS. Active Directory core components. You're about to see why Active Directory is a complex topic. To briefly go over some of the core components of an Active Directory environment. I'll include diagrams to help illustrate the topic. The components below are typical of any Active Directory environment. Active Directory domains, trees and forests. Forest, root domain, and child domain. Yeah, this one is also like active during the article. I've seen this terminologies before. The DFIR report. I think introductions and going briefly over important topics are an important way to introduce Active Directory to me. I'm kind of getting some idea. I don't think it's like I'm diving deep enough, but I think this is a good way to start. This is a perfect way to start. Not sure if I can upload him though. Okay, start. Active Directory organizes resources in a hierarchical logical structure. This logical structure helps to organize objects, define relationships, and control security boundaries. Active, once again, Active Directory organizes resources and a hierarchical logical structure. This logical structure helps to organize objects, define relationships, and control security boundaries. The forest is a top-level container and is a collection of Active Directory domains. I'm still confused about domains. Logical group of network objects. An Active Directory domain is a logical group of network objects that share the same. Oh, okay. Okay. So basically, they're like a group of computers, let's say, or units, devices that share the same Active Directory database. That makes a lot of sense. It serves as boundary for security policies and administrative control, allowing for centralized management of resources within the network. Active Directory domains are structured hierarch- hierarchically, which helps in organizing and managing network resources effectively. That makes sense. So basically, this root domain is all of the computers that are belonging to this particular Active Directory database. Is that it? Okay. The forest is top-level container and is a collection of Active Directory domains. Oh, so basically the forest is like where all the Active Directory domains are. So it's not just one Active Directory domain, there's a collection of Active Directory domains. The domains in the forest share a directory schema, directory configuration, and global catalog. Domains in the same forest automatically have a two-way transitive trust. When you first install Active Directory and create a domain, you are also creating a forest. Okay, Active Directory root domain is a logical structure of containers and objects within Active Directory. A domain contains the following components: a hierarchical structure for users, groups, computers, and other objects; security services that provide authentication and authorization to resources in the domain and other domains; policies that are applied to users and computers; a DNS name, domain name server name, a domain name server name to identify the domain. When you log into a computer, that is part of a domain you are logging into the DNS domain name. Domain name system domain name. When you log into a computer that is part of a domain, you are logging into the domain name system domain name. My domain name server domain name system domain at is add.activedirectorypro.com. This is how my domain is identified. Yep, that makes sense because all of this internet are like, well, the main purpose of DNS is to just provide a name so that you don't have to actually type an IP address, right? Because, well, normal people or people that are not related to IT will have a hard time remembering IP addresses, especially if you have a lot, right? But when it's like a domain name system, if it's like if if the IP address has a name, it's much easier. That's basically what DNS is for, right? The DNS name is to identify the domain. The computer is part of the domain you're logging into. Okay, so when you log into the so basically the server has a DNS. of the domain has a DNS, so that you can log into the DNS. You can log into the domain using the DNS. When you install Active Directory, you have to pick a domain name to use. It is recommended to use a subdomain of a routable domain name. For example, add that active directorypro.com, subdomain of activedirectorypro.com. The initial installation of Active Directory will create a forest in the root domain. Child domain is a domain that shares the same domain name space as the root domain. It is a domain with its own collection of objects. In this example, there are two child domains, east that add that activedirectorypro.com and west that add that activedirectorypro.com. Trees are a set of domains that are connected together. When you add a child domain to a parent domain, you create what is called a domain tree. A domain tree is just a series of domains connected together in a hierarchical fashion, all using the same DNS namespace. In the diagram above, the child domain east.add.activedirectorypro.com and west.add.activedirectorypro.com are part of the same domain tree. Why would you add this though, rather than like the functions, child domains? Is it like you have to have like higher permissions to access the root domain, and if you're like a normal employee, you're just going to have access to child domains? Is that the main purpose of having a child domain? In the diagram above, the child domain east.add.activedirectorypro.com and west.add domain schema. Schema is a set of rules, okay, that defines the classes of objects and attributes contained in the directory. Global Catalog. The global catalog contains information about every object in the directory. This allows users and administrators to find directory information regardless of which domain. The global catalog contains information about every object in the directory. This allows users and administrators to find directory information regardless of which domain in the directory actually contains the data. That makes sense. By default, the first domain controller in a domain is designated as the GC server, Global Catalog Server. It is recommended to have at least one global catalog server to each site to improve performance. Replication. Hmm. I have to review. Wait, I just have to check. I have to refresh my mind. It's just this term is like being thrown around a lot, and yeah, I have to refresh my understanding because I'm having trouble understanding some of the stuff. Basically, it's like it responds to requests, to client requests. Well, in this case, if you have a GC server, you can request for it to search because it's a global catalog, right? You want to find information you're just going to request it on a GC server. And the reason why it's recommended to have a lot is because each GC or global catalog server has its own domain that it can search, right? Instead of a global GC that searches for everything. Replication. The replication servers synchronize the Active Directory database with other domain controllers. Active Directory is typically deployed with two or more domain controllers for redundancy reasons. The replication service synchronized Active Directory database with other domain controllers. Active Directory database with other domain controllers. Active Directory is typically deployed with two or more domain controllers for redundancy reasons. When you create an account on one domain controller, it is replicated to the other one. If one domain controller goes down, the other one has to copy of it. So basically, it's for redundancy reasons. Basically, it's a backup, right? The concept of redundancy is basically like having two batteries on your remote controller. The other one is if the other one goes down, and vice versa. In the above diagram, if a user is added to DC1, it will be copied to DC2 and vice versa. Yeah. Sites and services. Active Directory sites are used to combine multiple domain controllers into logical containers that relate to their physical location. Sites are used to optimize the performance of Active Directory when you have multiple branch offices and domain controllers. The above example has two sites, and each site has two domain controllers. Domain controller. There is also a server, was basically a server that's running domain Active Directory. For example, there's two sites and each site has two domain controllers, basically like two active servers with Active Directory. The domain controllers in Site A use intra-site replication to keep all the changes synchronized between DC1 and DC2. Site A and Site B. Huh? Intra-site, meaning inside the site, right? Intra means inside, and inter means outside. Site A and Site B use inter-site. Yep. Replication to ensure changes in Site A and Site A are replicated in Site B and vice versa. Okay. Kerberos. Kerberos is the authentication protocol used by Active Directory to verify the identity of a user or host. The diagrams at the beginning of this guide look simple, but in the background there was a lot of communication between the client and Active Directory server to authenticate and authorize the user. Here's a diagram that shows the authentication process that happens in the background. The client sends a request to the Active Directory server. The client sends a request to the Active Directory server. The server responds with a TGT. What is that? What is a TGT? Ticket granting ticket. In the Kerberos authentication protocol, the full form of TGT is a ticket granting ticket. It is a critical component of the Kerberos system, enabling secure and efficient authentication. So basically, Kerberos is an authentication protocol, right? Used by Active Directory. Okay, Kerberos. is a critical component of the Kerberos system, enabling secure and efficient authentication within a network. A TGT, or ticket granting ticket, is the first ticket issued to a client by the key distribution center. After successful authentication, it serves as a proof of the client's identity and allows the client to request additional tickets for accessing specific network services without needing to enter. Oh yeah, I am familiar with the concept of ticket, so it basically it's basically the reason why you don't have to constantly type your credentials in each. Let's say if you're browsing, let's say a website that requires your login or your credentials, you basically type it in once, right? And when you type it in, you're given a ticket, and you're going to use that ticket as proof of your identity so that you don't have to prove your identity in each and every web page. That's basically it. So it requests ticket granting ticket, and then the Active Directory server gives ticket granting ticket the session key, and then it requests ticket plus authorization. Then it gives it ticket plus session key. Oh, so basically you're requesting a ticket granting ticket. It's a ticket to request a ticket. What is session key for? Session key? What is that? Session key is a temporary symmetric key used for encrypting data during a single communication session, ensuring secure data exchange between parties. Session key is a symmetric cryptographic key that is generated for a specific communication session, unlike long-term keys which are used for multiple sessions. Session keys are temporary and are discarded once the issue session ends. They are primarily used to encrypt and decrypt data exchange between two parties, ensuring confidentiality and integrity during the session. Okay. Request ticket. This is the real ticket because it contains the authorization, right? Or authentication. And then it gives the ticket that proves this guy is what he really is. And then server authentication. Request service for authentication and then authenticator. Okay. Okay. Let's see this. The client sends a request to the Active Directory server. The server responds with a ticket granting ticket and session key. The client can be used to encrypt and authenticate with the AD server Active Directory server. The client sends a request for a ticket. The server validates the requests and returns the service ticket. The client uses the ticket it received from the Active Directory server to request access to a network resource. The server will decrypt the ticket and validate the request. Okay. So basically, this guy grants you the authentication that you need by giving you the ticket after confirming that your identity, and the ticket that are issued by the Active Directory will be the one that are used to ask to give network resource or network access to you to grant your request for network resource, right? That's basically the process. FSMO roles. Microsoft introduced flexible single master operation roles in 2003. These FSMO roles can be distributed to different domain controllers, which can help with performance and redundancy. If one domain controller goes down, another DC will take over the missing role. Again, I don't understand anything. Microsoft introduced flexible single master operation rules in 2003. This flexible single master operation roles can be distributed to different domain controllers, which can help with performance and redundancy. If one domain controller goes down, another DC will take over the missing role. Flexible single master operation. Let's read this first. Schema master role manages the read-write copy of the schema in the Active Directory. Domain naming master role. Make sure you don't create a second domain name with the same name in the first. RID master is in charge of the SID for each object. What is SID? SID. Security identifier is in charge of the security identifier of each object. Each AD object must have a unique security identifier to prevent duplicates. The RID is in charge. What does RID mean? Relative identifiers. Hmm. Uniquely identify security principals such as users, groups, and computers within a domain. So basically, what gives SIDs or security identifiers are RIDs. Pool of RIDs per the RID master. Active Directory force recover raise the value of available RID pools. Use the following procedure to raise the value of the relative ID pools that RID operations master will allocate after PC is restored. By raising the value of the available RID pools, you can ensure that no DC allocates RID for security principal that was created after backup that was used to restore the domain. What is going on? So basically what I have to understand is that, well, it gives IDs. I think that's enough for now to better understand everything. Basically it gives SIDs for each object so that each and every one, each and every object in the Active Directory have a unique security identifier. PDC emulator is the authoritative DC in the domain. It is responsible for authentication requests, password changes, and group policy. PDC emulator. Take a deep dive. FSMO. So are the five flexible single-master operations, roles, and active. It operates on the domain level and plays a critical role ensuring the smooth functioning of various domain operations. Time source, password changes, account lockout management. What does PDC mean then? Primary domain controller. Okay. Primary domain controller is the authoritative domain controller of the domain. It's responsible for authentication. Basically, it's the main thing. Got lockout, group policy updates, backwards compatibility, distributed file system. Infrastructure master group manages the relationships of GUIDs, SIDs, and domain name between domains. Okay. Active Directory domain. Active Directory domain, AD. So all of these PCs are connected to this DC. To install Active Directory, you have to pick a domain name to use. It's recommended to use a subdomain of a routable domain name. For example, ad.activedirectorypro.com is a subdomain of activedirectorypro.com. Can I have access to that then if I just typed it in here? I thought, well, we can't because we don't have access. We're not authenticated to have access, right? Or maybe it just does not exist. When you join a computer to the domain, it will have DNS suffix of your domain name, for example, pc1.ad.activedirectorypro.com. This way, all of your domain joined systems are part of the same DNS namespace and can easily communicate. Okay, that makes sense. Also known as domain joined, Active Directory domain or Active Directory environment. Windows domain simply means your Active Directory server and its domain joined devices or systems using it for authentication and authorization. User accounts. User accounts are used to provide employees access to network resources. A user account is typically assigned to each employee, but sometimes shared accounts are used. User accounts are used to provide employees access to a network resource. A user's account is typically assigned to each employee, but sometimes shared accounts are used. The account is stored in the Active Directory database and can prove details on the employee, such as first and last name, streets, state, city, manager. You can set up a user account object in Active Directory. Hmm, interesting. Security groups. Security group is a collection of users or computers. It simplifies the administration of permissions for a group of objects. For example, if 20 people need access to a file, you can create a security group and add the 20 people into the group. Then you would just have to manage file access for the group instead of 20 devices. So that makes sense. I mean, you can just do, I mean, it's like adding an account into a group in like Ubuntu, right? On Linux, it's basically the same thing. This way, you can just assign permissions to the group, and all of the people inside the group will have access to that file, let's say. Computer's objects. When a computer is joined to the Active Directory domain, a computer object is created. is created. When the object is created in the Active Directory, it becomes a trusted object, which can be used to gain access to the network. For example, a user needs to log into the network and access a secured file. The user can log into the computer which is trusted and access the secured file if the user has been granted access. So basically, this object is trusted, but then you also have to log in to ensure that you actually have access to that file. But basically, this PC is like it already has the green light. Organizational units (OU). Active Directory organizational units are used to organize Active Directory objects. Organizing your AD objects makes it easier to administrate and apply policies. For example, you could organize all users into their own department folders. It is recommended to separate users and computers into their own OU. So basically in this picture, it shows that all of these AD Pro users, this AD, this is the folder for AD Pro users, and there's all the accounts that are present. Basically, it's just you just organize things, basically. Okay. The main benefit of Active Directory is its ability to centralize user management and access to network resources. Okay. Centralized management of user accounts. Wait, I'm just gonna skim through and take a look at what possible, because I want to apply TCP for IP address. This console is used to create and manage the TCP address pools in your network. This is one tool that actually has nothing to do with Active Directory. We don't need DHCP for Active Directory, but it's typically used to simplify setting up the addresses to computers. Okay. 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 I think what I'm going to do is to just open this tab. Well, to get back on this like article to see if we have any clarifications while studying. We're going back to studying the DFIR report because I want to get back to the report as early as possible in order to actually understand, because all of the knowledge are still fresh. So we're going to end the video here, and I'm going to upload a full video for the remaining part of the DFIR report tomorrow to apply all of the things that we learned about Active Directory. Because as I said, I just want like a familiar grasp of everything about Active Directory, and we're going to take a deep dive, but not right now. I just want to apply all of the things that I learned here for the FIR report. So we're going to end the video here. Thank you very much for listening and staying with me.